And then we've all been anxiously awaiting this presentation since it was pitched, and super excited. I can't think of anyone who's had a bigger impact on type and the type industry than Mark Simonson, and this is a glimpse back to the very roots of that. Is this when you first started type design?
Yeah, I'll kind of get into that.
Okay.
So,
okay, I don't want to jump in your presentation. Okay, so
okay.
everyone.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a glimpse into what it was like in the late 80s to make fonts on a machine like this. All right. Can everybody see the screen all right? Okay, so I've been dabbling in type design since I was in college in the mid-70s. I was doing stuff like this then. This is like an idea for a font that I did for a lettering project, which I drew in like 4-inch tall letters with rapidographs and, circle templates and compasses and stuff. You kind of see what the artwork looks like there. And kind of got interested in the idea of doing type design then, even though I was in a commercial art program, possibly becoming an illustrator or a graphic designer. Ended up becoming a graphic designer. But I remember at the time I saw an article in Upper and Lowercase magazine, the first time I ever saw it, where ITC, International Typeface Corporation, they had a call for entries for submissions for typeface designs, where if you could submit a design, and if they liked it, you would get like $1,500 up front, and then they would pay you royalties. And I was thinking, oh, that'd be really cool. So that sort of planted a seed in my brain. It was right around the time I did this project. So I won't really get into much with that. I did actually do a design that I submitted to them that wasn't accepted. But I did start getting into personal computers, home computers. First computer I got was a Sinclair ZX80, I guess as they say in the UK. I always called it a ZX80, but I guess it's a ZX80. And this had 1K of RAM and cost $100. And you hook it up to a black and white TV and a cassette player, and you're all set. And I did do a little bit of type on it, where I made this basic program, which basically just prints this letter, but I completely maxed out the RAM to do that. It was basically a series of print statements with like block characters. But I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Later on, in 1982, I got a Atari 800, or 400 and 800. I got a couple of these. But I started trying to make fonts on these. There's my setup with an Epson printer and a little color TV for a display. I started getting some graphics programs and trying to do lettering and type on this very underpowered computer. Not really meant for this kind of stuff. I did get a little program for designing fonts. This is what it looked like. You basically use a joystick to design a font, because the Atari computers are kind of like game computers, so they had like a joystick and stuff. So this is like one of the fonts I did on that. This is the default font, and this is my font. The thing about the Atari though is you could only have one font on the screen at a time. Like there was just the font, that was it. You could change the font to a different font, but there was ever no more than one font active at one time. So it would just be for the whole screen, there'd be one font. No bold, no italic, nothing, just a single font. Most computers back then were like that.
Did it have to be monospaced?
And also it was monospaced, right? So it was fixed with, so the characters were actually composed of 8 by 8 pixels in a square. You can kind of see it on the upper left there. So then in 1984, the Macintosh debuted, and I was really excited about this. I'd heard about the Lisa from a year earlier, but it was $10,000. And this is like basically like a Lisa, but only cost a quarter of that, or about $2,500. And I actually bought one of these at let's see, and also an ImageWriter printer, which, if we're lucky, Hans is going to bring one of these, and we can do a little demo. This I actually did at Dayton's department store on the Mac that was in the on display there when I bought one in Mac Paint. So here's the little sales sheet at Dayton's. You can see it cost $2,500 or $3,000 with the printer. So it's not a inexpensive purchase. I think that would be, I don't know, like $7,000 or $9,000 or something like that today, which is insane. But here I am using my first Mac computer here at a picnic. It was cool because you could, like, it was portable, so you could lug it around. You can see I still have, this is the case that I bought with it, which I brought this thing in with it. Now, a little background on this particular one. This isn't my original Mac. I bought this about 6 weeks ago from a place in Minneapolis called Free Geek, which is a place where you can bring your old electronics and they'll recycle it or else resell it, like if it's still in working, if there's still a market for it. And they have a section there of vintage computers that they use to raise money for it, because it's a nonprofit. And I happened to check their website, and this was on sale there for $300. And I thought, on a whim, I thought, okay, I just thought, okay, I'm going to buy it. And I went and bought it. And I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it at that point. But then I remembered Type Tuesday, and I thought this would be perfect for showing what it was like to make fonts on these things back in the day. Anyway, so this is the kind of stuff you could print on the ImageWriter printer. It had a really interesting print, like font system. This is before PostScript or desktop publishing. It's a little before that. So the LaserWriter and PostScript, that stuff didn't exist yet. What they had instead was a thing called QuickDraw, and these are fonts that worked with QuickDraw. And you notice, like with the Mac, you had proportional fonts, and they could be anywhere on the screen. They weren't fixed to a grid layout on the display or anything like that. You could put them anywhere you wanted on the screen. So you could do designs like this or whatever. This is in word processor. And what was cool is that the ImageWriter printer, the screen was 72 dpi, which was really cool to me because as a graphic designer, 72 dpi like translates to type sizes and picas and points and everything. And it had a WYSIWYG display, so it was, the idea is what you see is what you get. So when you printed a document from the screen, it would be exactly the same size and look exactly the same when you printed it on the printer. So you can see here, they had two print modes. It was faster, which would just print you exactly what you saw on the screen at 72 dpi, and then it had better, or best, which would double the resolution to 144 dpi. And basically, if there was a double-size font, so if you had 12-point New York in this case, and you also had 24-point New York, it would use 24-point to print 12-point on the higher resolution on the printer. So you effectively got higher resolution output. And when I saw how the Mac had these fonts and stuff, I really wanted to make my own fonts on it. I mean, I already kind of dabbled with it a little bit with my earlier computers, but this was like, it just seemed like an incredible device to make fonts on. And I saw this ad, or not an ad, but an article in this early Macintosh magazine. I can just sort of zoom in on it here. If you can see that there's the font editor, right? So Apple apparently had this font editor that you could get. If you sent them $100, they'd send you a bunch of disks with developer tools and stuff like that, including this font editor. And that was like in the fall of 1984. I bought the Mac in February '84, I think. So I'm going to do just a little demo here of this software. Now this program is so old that even the Mac Plus is too new for it to run on. So I'm going to actually use an emulator to do a demo of that. So let me see here. Oops. Yeah. Okay. So this is actually running on my laptop here. It's not running on this. And here's the app here. It's just called Font Editor. And I can just show you here the fonts that are on the system here. You know, you can kind of see them down at the bottom there. And then also, just so you know, real 128K Macs don't run this fast. I mean, this is like blindingly fast compared to a real one. So when you start this up, this program is super crude compared to like normal Mac apps. There's like no open and save dialog boxes. There's no new command. And it took me a long time to figure out what it was expecting me to do at this point, because if I clicked OK here, it would just crash. The one name you can't use for a font is System, but that's the name that they give you. And I think it's because maybe at some earlier point it was the default name and it worked. Like I think the name for Chicago used to be System. Anyway, so I need to type in the name of a font here. I've got one, and it's actually looking for the name of a font that's on the disk, and I happen to have one there, so I'll just type it in. Oops, yeah, Sans 24. And I'm going to just type in the size here. We won't get into these details here. And here it is. And basically, you can click in this area here and change the font. If you want to work on a different letter, you just click on these letters or go down here and jump back and forth like this. So it's got this very simple user interface. Like the close box doesn't do anything. You can see here it doesn't have the normal file menu with, you know, open and save as and stuff like that. Instead, it has save font in, load from resource. This undo all changes doesn't do anything except make it crash. The only commands in it, you can insert a character, delete a character, you can shift a character to the left or to the right or up or down, or you can insert a column of pixels on the left or delete a column of pixels on the left. And that's about it. You can change the height to, like if you wanted to increase or decrease the point size, you would use these commands here. It has a sample window, and to change the text, you can't just type on it. You have to type something new here, and then click OK, and now it changes it. And then if you make changes to a letter here, and look at the sample window, see it, oh, it has changed. Okay, sometimes you have to click redraw to do that. But it's a fairly crude program, so I'm not really going to show you much. And now notice when I quit, it doesn't say...
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
So I'm noticing under the glyph's name, there's a number. Is that the name of the glyph? I mean, this is like
That's
Unicode, right?
That's the ASCII code for the glyph.
That's the ASCII code.
Yeah. So this is ASCII code 72. You know, the letter A is 65.
Thank you.
And it actually goes, the standard ASCII is only up to 127 or something like that, but it goes beyond that for foreign characters and stuff like that. But the early fonts were pretty crude compared to what we have now in terms of like how they keep track of them in the system and how many fonts can be on the system and things like that. But notice when I quit, it just quits. It doesn't ask you if you want to save changes, you know. So it's very unforgiving. You know, you could very easily lose work in it. So I'm going to get out of that. And what's interesting is I played around with this for a while in the fall of '84 and early '85. And one of the things I've discovered I could do is I basically made transparent Xeroxes of some type specimens from a type book, and then I taped them to the screen, and was able to make a facsimile of Century Expanded this way. And you can see the results here. This is a ImageWriter printout from back then. And then in early '85, a new app came out called Fontastic, which only had the best graphic designers, as you can tell. But it was basically everything that font editor was not. It was stable. It had all the features you could want. One of the problems with font editor was that it always assigned the font number 12 to every font. Every font on the Mac system back then had a font number, and there were only 512 possible, which means that the whole universe of fonts back then, the maximum was 512, if you can imagine. I mean, I think I've made more than that many fonts. And it would automatically assign number 12 to your font. And so if you tried to install it, if there was another font that had number 12, it would wipe it out. And so you had to do some gymnastics with special resource tools and stuff like that to fix the font number on it. It was a big headache, but Fontastic took care of all that stuff. It always asked you right away what number you wanted to use for the font. But I ended up making a bunch of fonts with this, with the idea of selling them kind of on disc, like mail order, as kind of like clip art. Other companies were doing that at the time, and I sort of thought about doing that. But I'm going to do a little demo now of Fontastic on an actual Mac here. Let's see. Here we go. So this is actually the output from this Macintosh Plus that I bought a few weeks ago. I've got it going through this little device here into this computer, and it's showing up on the screen. So what I'm doing on the Mac here is you're seeing right up on the projector display. So first we'll take a look at this is the original version of Fontastic from 1985. Actually, this is a slightly newer version. I don't have the very earliest one. But you can see here, it starts off asking you if you want to open one of the files that's in the system. I can just open one here. Well, here's my Century font. Okay. So basically, it works just like the other one, except it does allow you to change the width of the font, and you can even have one of the limitations of that font editor app was that you couldn't have any parts of the letter that went outside the bounding box. So if you wanted overlapping letters, that was not possible. Whereas that is possible with this, since it was actually possible with the font format to do that. It's also got hands so you can slide the thing around, and I think, yeah, this is a pretty early version of it. I'm not going to spend too much time with this one, but you can use tools like this to as a eraser tool. If you ever used Mac Paint, it works just like fat bits in Mac Paint. There's a line tool. You can see the results down here. And this is basically all the characters you could have in a font at that time. Oh, he's here.
Straight out of 1985.
Yeah.
And
So I'm just going to quit this and show you the better version. Don't want to save the changes here. So a little while later, they came out with a better version called Fontastic Plus with a much nicer icon. And this cool about screen. And you might recognize the name AltSys. They were the ones that created the first PostScript font editor on the Mac. So let's see, Type Tuesday, Bitmap fonts. Open this one. Good. So this is another font that I made. It's basically like a typewriter font, a monospaced typewriter font that would mimic the look of. Let's see. Oh, I gotta open up one of these. So if I open up 12 point here. Yeah. So you notice the tools are very similar to the other one. It does have a selection tool now, so you can, drag parts of the letter around. And it has undo. That's something that Apple's font editor didn't have. It didn't have any undo. And it actually has different layers here too. So there's you could put an image in the background to trace from or whatever. And it also has a guideline layer. So I think you can, can't quite remember how this works, but I think you can add, I don't remember how this works, but I think it's possible to add, no, it's not going to let me do anything. Okay, never mind. But you can change the, width of the character here. And there is also, there should be a preview window here somewhere. Oh, sample. There we go. So here's a sample window, and you can see you can type stuff in here. So it's a lot more flexible than either the first two. And also notice that it shows you a preview of all the characters in this font view. That was something more advanced, I guess. It also has certain effects, like if you want to make it into a bold style, you could just go like that, and it would just basically smear the font to the right. Or italic. And of course you'd want to edit this, I suppose. Maybe, oops. Oops. There, that's a little bit more reasonable. Way too slanted though, I think. And this version actually, because it came out later, like let's see, when is this from? This is from 1988. So at this point, Apple expanded what the fonts could do on the Macintosh because the laser printer was already out by now. So you were able to have families of fonts that would have like regular italic, bold italic. And they also expanded the range of font numbers so that it was in the tens of thousands instead of a couple hundred.
Are those foreign characters mapped to an escape?
Yeah, actually, you can sort of see how what they're mapped to, because you notice this one here says ON and then N, so it's option lowercase n and then capital M to get that character.
Okay.
So this is Shift Option C, Option EI, Option tilde I. You know, it actually shows you, instead of the character code, they showed you how to type it.
Yeah.
So is the LaserWriter, is there then like vector sort of equivalents?
Right. You could print these to a LaserWriter, but they would just be bitmaps. And, you know, so these were kind of obsolete by the time the LaserWriter came out, which is partly why I stopped making them, even though it was kind of fun. But at this point, they had, Apple had expanded what you could do with a font and had a more complex font structure. It was because of the LaserWriter, because Adobe had hundreds of fonts they wanted to release on it, and other companies wanted to release fonts, and in order to support that, they had to expand what the font resources could do.
Or at this point in '88, was that coinciding with the vector fonts and encapsulated PostScript?
Yeah, I'm sort of getting ahead of things here, talking about the LaserWriter, but I'm about to get into that. So this is basically Fontastic, which was the first real font editing program I used on a Mac. And I mostly used this in 85, 86, 87, that era kind of. I kept kind of added a little like into 88, like this is from 88. But at that point, and actually some of my fonts that I made around this time ended up getting some use later. I'll open a font here. Let's see. Yeah, Condensed Gothic here. This font ended up being used on the Pebble watch about 10 years ago, about 2012 or something like that. I made a version of this in TrueType format for the Pebble watch, including making Cyrillic and Greek characters for it. And it's like a full TrueType font. It's not actually a pixel font. It's actually just outlines that look like pixels. So it did have a life beyond the small screen.
These fonts are can be sort of installed into the system. Can they be
Right.
accessed from other software?
Yeah,
So like a greeting card software or whatever could use your fonts.
right. So, so if you, like here, I'll just open up a document here. So here's Microsoft Word.
Running off a hard drive?
Yeah, it's actually an SD card. So here's some of the fonts I did back then in Microsoft Word. You can see you can just eventually, just pick them from the font menu here. I installed a bunch of stuff in here. You notice that I only made like certain sizes of things. So, like say this Century font here, I just made 9, 12, 18, and 24, and it highlights those in the font menu. You can pick other sizes, but it just sort of scales them up or down crudely to get the size.
Traced it on the screen. In the last window, it said that you traced the Century
Oh yeah,
on the screen.
yeah. I showed that, and maybe you missed that
I did.
before you came in. Yeah, I can sort of see it here.
Okay, cool.
See, I made a transparent Xerox of a type specimen and then taped it to the screen and traced it in this font program.
That's cool. Thanks.
Sure. Then in 1985, Apple introduced the LaserWriter printer, which it's hard to believe now, but it cost $7,000 $8,000, I think.
In 1985.
Yeah, I thought I had it written down here, but yeah, I mean it'd be like $20,000 today. I mean, I couldn't afford it back. I mean, a Mac was expensive as it was.
Yeah.
I mean,
2600.
it was $2,500, and which is the equivalent of about, I don't know, 3 times that much today. And so I couldn't afford one of these. So, but it was very significant because not only was it was a 300 dpi laser printer, but it also came with PostScript built in, which is an outline font format by Adobe, which allowed you to define the characters with mathematical outlines, Bezier curves. Let's see, find my spot here. And this kind of made me lose interest in making bitmap fonts when this came out, because I was a graphic designer. I started using the Mac to produce graphic stuff. I was doing some freelance work at the time for a locally based magazine called Utne Reader. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Eric Utne was the publisher. His son was going to the U at the time, and so he used his son's discount to get a LaserWriter for about half price and a Mac, and with the idea that, well, this is great because it comes with Times Roman, and we set the magazine in Times Roman, so we can just use this to make the magazine and save money on typesetting. It wasn't quite ready for that at that point in 1985. I tried doing some experiments using MacDraw, where you could set stuff and it would print out in Times Roman. But it was super crude. You can only do a single page layout, and there was no hyphenation or justification. There was no, you couldn't control the spacing. You couldn't even control the line spacing very much. It was just very crude. And I think the thinnest line you could do was 1 point. But pretty soon, things like PageMaker came out. This is the original PageMaker here, and the sample document that came with it. And that sort of opened the door and made all this stuff possible. There was a few others. There was one called Ready, Set, Go, another one called Mac Publisher. But PageMaker was the one that you could actually get something done in. Around this time, Adobe Illustrator came out, and Photoshop a little bit later. But PageMaker was really what kind of started the whole thing. And right around that time in 1987, I think, no, 1986. Yeah, 1986, yeah, Fontographer was released. This is the same people who made Fontastic, the program I was just doing the demo of. And when it came out, this is like right after the LaserWriter came out, and it says it's for making laser fonts for your Apple LaserWriter. I mean, this was really at the dawn of this era, and pretty soon Linotype would come out with their, high resolution raster image processor, where you could, it was basically a photo typesetting machine, digital photo typesetting machine that you could output PostScript to. But this is the advertisement I got in the mail from them. Here it says it's coming out in December 30th, 1985. So yeah, this is very early. So 1985. And then right around this time too was a scanner that worked with the ImageWriter printer that let you basically take the printer cartridge out and put this scanner in its place. And then you would feed a document through it like a photo, and you could actually scan a document, just like I found this on YouTube. That's how it worked. It took hours to scan a page, but I'm exaggerating not very much.
All these innovations and products came out much sooner than I remember.
Yeah, this is in about 85.
Hmm.
But I got one of those. And, oops, let's see. And I used, this is what the scans look like. This is from an old magazine. This is an old Albrecht Dürer print. But I used it to scan fonts, like out of typesetting catalogs. And here's my original manual and disc. So it's a very tiny, I've got a copy. Here's the manual right here. I mean, look at, this is like, that's all there is to it, you know. So I'm going to do a demo of that now. Oops. So I don't have the very first version of this. This is like version 2, I think, which is from, when is this? 1987. So there's a couple years into it.
It was running on 480K.
Yeah. So it wants you to open a font. Let's see. Actually, this font you might recognize if you know my work. So this is a font that I later released as Refrigerator. But this is, I started working on it back when I had the original Fontographer. But the way the program works, I'm doing Command E to, oops, a lot of the, oops, what did I do? Close, oops. I think I just deleted the letter. Nope, there it is.
You went to the space character.
Oh, that's what I did. You're right. Yeah, I typed space. Yeah, so it switched to space. Oh, that's handy. I forgot that. Now, one thing that's interesting about this is it's one of the first. It did some things before any other apps on any personal computers. It was the first app that let you edit Bezier curves in a native format. So if I enlarge this here. I'm going to make the window bigger. Doesn't seem to have a like a hand grabber hand that you can move things around. But you know, it's got Bezier control handles just like our modern font editors. And I think, yeah, the shift key constrains it. Just like it still does. Unfortunately, it doesn't like give you any indication where this is connected, but let's
Are
see.
the measurements at the top in pixels or?
They're in PostScript units.
Okay.
So a PostScript font is defined in a 1,000 unit tall space. The width can be anything, you know, from 0 to 4,000 or something like that. And then that 1,000 units, when you say set a font at 72 point, it scales those 1,000 units down to 72 points high. And that's basically how it works. So if you set a 12-point font, it scales it down to 12 point. If you set a 1,000-point font, it's exactly 1,000. So.
Oh, so points as in type points.
Right. So then
So those are the
each
units.
unit would be 1 point if you set a 1,000-point font. And that's still true today.
Mm-hmm. In the software.
Right, in PostScript-based fonts. TrueType goes up, the standard is 2048. And it's possible to do other things, but I won't get into that. Anyway, yeah. So basically this, you have like a tangent tool here. And then a corner tool. Let's see, the tangent tool lets you, yeah, I'm not sure, I've forgotten how this tangent tool works. The curve tool lets, one thing I have to say is I never liked the drawing tools in this app. And I actually ended up doing most of my drawing at this time in Illustrator, and then copied and pasted it into Fontographer. You notice how bumpy the curve looks?
Yeah.
That's something that bugged me a lot. In Illustrator, everything was perfectly smooth, even in the very first version. And you notice how, as I'm drawing, it kind of flashes on and off? Illustrator didn't do that either.
On the same platform, in a Mac.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to do with the way it was programmed. Illustrator was using like an off-screen buffer, I mean, to get technical, and so you never saw the redrawing. It just looked like it was happening in real time. So I'm not going to show too much of this early version here, but there's things like, let's see, view, fit. Okay, so there's, you can, flip the character. Oops, I have to select it all. Flip the character. Flip it vertical. They're just kind of typical things you might expect. Rotate, by 45 degrees. There isn't like a rotate tool or anything like that. You have to just type it in and it does it from the center of the... I mean, move is kind of weird because it seems like you should just be able to... You can just move it, obviously. But I guess it's if you want to move it a certain amount. Oh, you can set the base point. Change tool, I'm not sure what that is. Now, one interesting thing that this program had that was also very early was it had layers. So you notice that when I click this icon in the upper left here, they call them planes. But there's like the outline layer, the background layer, and then the guideline layer. And see here you can see all my guidelines are just lines that I've drawn in the using the Bezier tools here. And then there's font attributes, the accent and decent, leading, stroke width. This early version of Fontographer also couldn't make PostScript Type 1 fonts or TrueType fonts yet. It only made Type 3 PostScript fonts, which were not as nice as Adobe's Type 1 fonts. So, for instance, if you printed them on a LaserWriter printer, there was no hinting in them, so they often came out bolder than you would expect, because it was just sending it as if it was a illustration in Illustrator. It's just sending that to the printer. So it didn't have any special instructions in the fonts to make them look crisper and nicer, the way that Type 1 fonts could do. And at the time, Adobe, that was a proprietary format for Adobe, and they only did that for their own fonts, and Linotype and other partners like Monotype. They did PostScript Type 1 fonts, but the general public didn't have access to making those fonts. So
I imagine at this point you probably couldn't set up kerning pairs.
yeah, it had kerning.
Oh, it did.
Yeah. Let's see. There's, if I go into the metrics window here, now my R is all messed up here, but so I can type in like A and T,
It's cool.
and then I can, kern the A and T like this. And it'll catch up with me eventually. There we go. Oh, it's putting the kern on this side, I guess. Yeah, I don't remember exactly how this stuff works. Let's see if I think I can actually type a number in. No, you can't. You have to just use the arrows here. There. See, it's current. And then you could just do generate PostScript, and it would, create a PostScript. You could create PostScript files from this too, which you could then download to the laser printer, or generate a font. Let me see. You could also edit the bitmaps. In the early days of PostScript fonts, you had the printer font and the screen font. And the screen font was a bitmap font, like the ones I was doing in Fontastic. And you could edit those inside this program too. I can't remember exactly where you do that. It's been a while since I've used this. Yeah, I think we'll take a look at a more advanced version of this app next. Let's see if there's anything I missed. Yeah, I think I covered everything. Yeah, now the thing about PostScript 3 fonts, they can do some things that Type 1 fonts can't do, since you can they're basically like each character is an encapsulated PostScript image. So you could do grayscale, you could do patterns, you could do images even in a Type 3 font. None of that stuff was possible in Fontographer, but for instance, Eric Van Blockland made this font called Beowulf, where every time you printed a letter, the outline would be slightly different, because he used the PostScript random command to introduce randomness in the font. And you couldn't view it on the screen. There was just a screen font on the screen. But when you printed it on a PostScript printer, every time you printed it would be slightly different. And so if you're going to use it with to do a multicolored job, there would never be perfect registration, because each instance of the output, it would be slightly different. So then we move on to, they finally got a graphic designer now. It's looking a little bit better. So this version is from 1992. So it's a little bit later. Open font. So I'll just show you a couple of things here. I mentioned that I scanned fonts with the ThunderScan. This is an example of a font that I made that way. Oh wait, it's interpreting a Type 1 font? That's not what I want. It's opening a Type 1 font here instead of opening my font document. I need to... Things were slower in those days.
Way.
I wonder if I can... No, I was able to cancel it. Let's see, open font. And yeah, let's see. Here it is. Okay. Wasn't sure which file. The thing is, in this old interface, you can't tell what kind of files you're looking at. Okay, so here we go. So now if you look at this, you notice in the background here, there is an image, which is an image that I scanned. It even has multiple undos at this point, which is, things are getting crazy now. Yeah, if I go back to my back to the Finder here, let's see, PostScript fonts. I'm going to open this up in Super Paint. Which is kind of a super version of Mac Paint, I guess.
How they ever decided on those textures.
It's
Yeah.
there's no nationality.
But
Yeah, so here's the scan. And basically what I did was, I think I probably copied, selected this, copied it, and pasted it into Fontographer. But this is the quality of scans you would get with the ThunderScan, which is pretty crude. I mean, I think it was probably 144 dots per inch or something like that. But, and then I added these guidelines to aid in positioning it in Fontographer. Let's see, go back to all these shortcut commands are, now we finally have a grabber hand, yay. But now you notice there's a pen tool over on the left. So this is a bit more advanced than the that earlier version. And this works very much like pen tools in modern font editors. And another thing too is that, I don't know if you noticed before, but like I don't get to look at a filled in version of the character here. In order to see that, I have to go to the metrics view. That's really the only way you can see what the character looks like filled in. It doesn't seem like. Seems like I should be able to see that blob in the metrics view. That's kind of weird. It's not drawing.
Oh, is it in the background?
I'm not sure what happened there. Oh, maybe it's, oh, that's what it is. It's because I'm in the background. You're right. Come on, you can do it. This is what it was like. This is really the part that I wanted to show you. It's how slow everything was.
do we know how, I mean, I'm sure somebody does, but do we know what the processor speed was?
8 megahertz.
8 megahertz?
Yeah. And now they're like something like 3 or 4 gigahertz. I think I've just frozen the program. I may need to crash this computer. Luckily, I installed the programmer switch on the side. Oops. Any questions while we're waiting for it to boot up?
On the bitmap fonts then, so like when the size was 12 was 12, basically the UPM, that was like the total units top to bottom.
Yeah, technically it could be, but generally it was a little bit larger than that. So usually like on a 12-point font, it would be 15 units. So there was like room for accents and things like that. So the size in the font menu would be 12, but it would actually take up more than 12 points on the screen. And that was pretty typical. Okay, open this up again. I mean, in some ways, this computer is faster than I remember. In other ways, it's way slower than I remember. I installed 4 megabytes on this. In the stock version came with 1 megabyte. When you install 4 megabytes on it, it takes much longer to start up because it has to do a memory check.
The solid state drive might be helping too.
The solid state drive helps a lot. If I was running off of floppy, that would be pretty slow. Let's see, what else do I want to show you in this? So one of the things about Fontographer, this later version of Fontographer, this is 3.5. I think 3.0 is when these features were introduced, about 1991 or so. It not only supports type 1 fonts, it can do hinting, it can do true type fonts, it can export true type fonts. And also multiple masters. I didn't really use it for that because it was kind of very complicated to set up. But it does, if you look in the one of these menus here, there is a multiple master setup thing somewhere. Oops. Screen went to sleep. And there is a change weight command, which, say if you do, we'll do a big amount here, show you what it does. Some of these commands, people who are longtime Fontographer users just totally relied on them, and that was one of them. I remember Ryan Hughes, type designer in the UK. I sort of helped him switch over to Glyphs, which is a more modern one, but he was still using Fontographer for years. And that was the one reason, is because it didn't have the change weight command. Because he apparently used that a lot. Yeah, where is...
What's in your expert?
Expert? Oh yeah, here we go. There it is. Multiple master setup. Yeah, hinting setup. A lot of these things I don't remember using a lot. So you can set in alignment zones, stems, you know, recalc, rehint. I mean, it was, you know, I think fairly sophisticated stuff for the time. Let's see what else here. Multiple master setup. Oop. You have to have 2 or 4 fonts. So I have to have 2 fonts open in order to do that. Same with interpolate setup. Interpolate is kind of like where you have 2 fonts and you want to make one that's halfway between. You could interpolate 2 fonts. I did use that a little bit at some point with the early version of Proxima Nova, Proxima Sans. In fact, let me just show you. So this Visigothic, this is actually a early version of what later became Proxima Nova. So this is before I was even finished with the alphabet on it. And it seems like you should be able to. Right. I thought there was a way to preview the character. I think there's a later version that let you preview the character, but not yet.
It sounds like something would be in the file menu.
Yeah, you can edit the bitmap here. Let's see. So this is the 24-point bitmap, and let me see forget how you change. So it's basically like a little version of Fontastic within the program. So you could hand edit the bitmaps in it. Since they were required at the time in order to display on the Mac screen, you couldn't display PostScript fonts or TrueType. Well, TrueType fonts you could, but PostScript fonts you couldn't display the outline font on your screen until things like Adobe Type Manager, and then that was all built in when System 10 came out. It did allow you to do components or composites. So like if you do new composite here, if I remember how it works. Cancel. No, I think what I want to do is, so you can select a character here, like, let's say you wanted to do an accented character. Redraw it here. Oh, where have all my characters gone? Quit this and start it again. Okay, let's see. So you do get part, okay, and then go to another character, like see the C, paste, and now it's basically placed a reference to the letter I in the C. So this is how you did accents and stuff like that back then. So you'd get you'd like get a part and then combine them together. You can actually, here, let's paste another one. See, now there's two of them. Here we are. And now the C has an I on either side. So if you go to the metrics window, see, and if you move them around, it should change it on here. Yeah. So this sort of thing is still used nowadays to build accented characters and Chinese characters and Japanese characters that are built of smaller components. So it wasn't totally primitive, but let's see if anything, components, metrics. Oh, it also had something called kerning assistance, I think. I don't think this version of it has it though. Expert, yeah. I think it was just after this, maybe version 4.0. It had a thing called kerning assistance where you could tell it that, okay, all of these letters are similar to each other, so when they're next to these other letters that are similar to each other, use the same kerning for those. If one of them is kerned this way, you kern them all that way. And there's similar. There's a similar facility in modern OpenType fonts with class kerning. But it was basically a one-time thing where you'd basically set up a bunch of rules and then say, okay, now I'm going to kern the font and now apply kerning assistance. And then it would just like write all the kerning all at once. And if you wanted to make changes, you could only do piecemeal changes. You couldn't, it wasn't dynamic. If you made a change to the T and the A kerning, it wouldn't change the kerning for the T followed by the accented A. You'd have to apply kerning assistance again each time you made a change like that. So I think that's a bit about. Does anybody else have any, or do you have any other questions about Fontographer before I move on?
The multiple master, you said you need 2 or 4. Do you do like 2 axes?
Right, like 2 for a 1 axis and 4 for 2 axes. So for like, you could do like light to bold, or you could do light to bold and also light condensed to bold condensed, and then it would do anything in the middle. And then, oh, here, I guess I'll show you the font attributes here. Pretty similar to the earlier version. It also had character info for each character. You could do, in Type 3 fonts, you could do like grayscale characters. So that's why it asks the tint percentage here. You could even do stroke characters. So you could make fonts that were just based of skeletons and then define the weight of the stroke and have round ends and stuff like that.
Where's the set width for each of the characters?
It's just you use this tool here
Okay.
and then just, oops.
So they don't consider it an attribute?
No, it's something you control in the character window here.
Okay.
You notice that as I move things around, it tells me what the distance is from the baseline or from the left edge, and how much I'm changing it. See, I'm moving it, 546 units to the right, stuff like that. So. There, that's restored, and then let's see, does it? Yeah. I forget what this pin does. I think the pin is for, yeah. If I rotate the font, like say 45 degrees, it'll rotate around that base point.
That thing sounds like a Mac keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not like our modern low-profile keyboards.
It's just got such an iconic sound.
Clunky.
Mhm.
What time is it? Let's see. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple other things that I used back then. Let me show you one other thing in Fontographer. This felt-tip Roman, which was one of my first font releases back in the 90s, was built in Fontographer. And actually it had a better scanner by this time. And let's see if I can find it here. Yeah. Here's the original artwork.
Oh, wow.
On the back of a phone notepad. So I basically just scanned it and then pasted the letters in one by one in the background. I actually used a program called Acta, which is like a desk accessory. I can show you here. I put all the letters in here and then this is how I got all the letters into Fontographer. So they basically are all stored in here, so I don't have to keep opening and closing files. I can just have this open, click this, copy it, and then paste it into the background in Fontographer. So I think that should, like if I copy this now and go to the background, delete that and paste. Yeah. And each one is size. I've made sure that the height is the exact same size as the font, so it's always the right size when I paste it in. I did something similar with that Visigothic Proxima Nova font, early Proxima Nova font, with Illustrator, where I did the artwork in Illustrator and then pasted the Illustrator outlines into Fontographer. And I think I've got, let me see, I don't know if I have the, yeah, I don't have the artwork here. I do have printouts of the artwork, though. So here's the artwork in Adobe Illustrator that I used, and then I basically copied it character by character into Fontographer. I learned all sorts of tricks for that too, because it was really slow. Like when you pasted a character in, it was just like, go get a cup of coffee, you know. So I learned that what you can do is like select 6 at a time and paste in 6 at a time. It would take the same amount of time, but then once you got it into Fontographer, it was much faster copying and pasting it within the font program. So
Why did it take so long?
because it's slow processors, you know. I mean, it's only run at 8 megahertz or 16 megahertz or whatever.
And there's hardly any memory.
There's not a lot of memory. It's
Keep buffering out
yeah.
to the drive.
And I mean, the thing is that when you're copying something out of Illustrator, it's basically copying an EPS document. And so it's copying way more than you really need probably, because it's thinking you're going to paste this into, I don't know, Microsoft Word, and who knows, maybe there's like a whole illustration there, you know, or something like that. It's got this whole preamble and, you know, all this setup stuff.
And the other thing is it's having to draw it to the screen.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you the very first version of Illustrator, if you are curious, which is also from, let's see, when is this from? 1987.
No patch.
In fact, I've got, there's the packaging for it.
Huh.
I was back before you just downloaded something from the App Store. I mean, you got the deluxe package. I mean, it's beautifully printed. It comes with a video cassette with John Warnock actually doing a demo, showing you how to do it, how to use it. You get 5 discs and a printed manual with a hardcover on it. Ring binder. Anyway.
In a slipcase.
Yeah, in a slipcase. So here is Adobe Illustrator. Now, interestingly, when you first do a new document, it asks for a template. And basically, it's asking you for like a Mac Paint image or something like that you're going to trace. So, I don't know, let's see. I don't think there's any, I'm just going to say there's none. But it was just sort of assuming you were going to do something like that. So the pen tool here works pretty much the way it works now. And you can see how much smoother it is than Fontographer. I mean, it's just beautiful, I think. And let me see, I don't think, I'm trying to remember how, oh yeah, you can select it and then scale. I mean, just look how much smoother the display is, you know. And then to see what it looks like, you can do preview. You couldn't do artwork and preview at the same time. But there was a workaround for that. What you would do is create a new view and set this one to preview, and then notice it's a little bit slower there. And you could do things like, if you wanted to change the fill, you could change it to like 40%. Yeah, I mean, this is basically the property, you know, like, I mean, there's so many, it's hard to believe how primitive this was. You could actually specify color here too. although it wouldn't display in color on this screen. I think it would on a Mac too. You can also specify the stroke. Like, say you're going to do a 6 with a round end. Oop. What did I do? I thought it was a 10% fill. Or 40%. There we go. There we go. So these keyboard shortcuts for zooming in and out still work the same. Let's open one of the demo things here. Gallery. Oops. Page layouts.
This should be interesting.
It's interesting how it displays the grayscale using different patterns. 'Cause it's not like a, they're not like Bende patterns, you know.
Where's the layers found?
There is none.
No layers.
No layers, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
No what?
There's no layers.
Oh,
Here, let's see. Fit in window. This is what made people buy Mac 2s.
Yes.
like the color?
No, they're faster. Well, color also, but they're also faster. Anyway, yeah, so that's Illustrator. And it did have a lot of, like, you could do type in it too. Let's see, it had the type tool here. When you click, you had to pick a font. Say Helvetica Bold. 38 point. You notice that it's not showing it in the font. It's just showing it in Chicago, the system font. And then there it is. And there's no kerning, I don't think. Let me see. So, in fact, if you have to select it, and then how do you? Oh, type. Okay. Oh yeah, kerning. Oh, you can change the spacing, which is called kerning here. So if you do like 100. It's going to space it out.
Yeah, it doesn't tell you what units that is. It's just.
It's PostScript units,
Oh, so it's.
basically. So I think, or though, no, 100 would only be a little bit of that. So I'm not sure. I think it's points, actually. Minus 10, what does that do? Yeah, that's way more than PostScript units. So it looks like it's almost like it's points or something. I'm not quite sure. You have to look in the manual.
Call it kerning, but it's not really letter spacing, right?
Yeah, or tracking, I guess. And you couldn't do inter-letter kerning. I mean, not in this version yet.
What year was this?
87. So that's a little constrained. It did have group and ungroup. It did have paste in back and paste in front. So instead of layers, you could just kind of control things that way.
Can you lock shapes?
Lock things? I don't think so.
It would be so hard to be careful. Yeah, select the right little thing in your golfer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Those must have been really. Let's see. So you can group that. I'm gonna group all of this here. And so now if we move this, it all moves together. Constrain. Oh. Okay. I don't know what that means. Oh, there are rulers in here too. Oh, they're in the not where I expected them. And then this toolbox here, that's everything, you know. You got the pointer, the hand, magnifying glass, pen tool, type tool, and then shapes. You did have a scissors here where you could. Oh. Okay. Ah,
It still does things.
doesn't like it.
Those exclamation.
I think I have to ungroup this. There. Now did I? I don't know if not sure what I did. Oh yeah, I think I, yeah, there it is. I cut the node there. Anyway. Yeah, so it's pretty bare bones, especially by modern standards. But at the time, it was like amazing, because just the idea that you could design, do an illustration or some lettering or something like that in this, and then print it out to a Linotronic image center, you know, with halftone screens and everything.
Send it to your print.
About what year
Right.
was this?
What's that?
About what year?
1987.
87?
Yeah.
Would you be able to, I mean, we had modems, but were the file sizes such that you could, were the printing houses equipped to get them electronically?
Theoretically.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't do that very much in the early years when I was using service bureaus. I would basically drive there with a floppy disk.
Sneaker net.
Yeah. You know, or maybe even bring my hard drive along. Usually it was a floppy disk, or you would courier a floppy disk to the service bureau. Here's Illustrator 88, which is a little bit later. Now this one actually supported color. I kind of like the old icons with that script A. They've totally lost the Venus, Botticelli Venus logo thing, but let's see, open one of these. Oh, boy. You weren't kidding. And you notice the page tiling. This was an interesting feature in the early Illustrator, where you basically put these boundaries. That's like the edge of the printable area on the page. And you could print banners by basically running stuff across those and print. Like this is, you can see this is page 2 and page 3 and page 5 and page 6. And that's page 4 and 1, I think, over there. And so I used to lay out whole books that way, where there would be a page on each little tile. Kind of crazy way to work, but that's what I was doing. Okay. Yeah, this still has the separate preview mode. I don't think it was until version 3 that it actually combined the preview and artwork mode. Their competitor, Aldous Freehand, one of the big selling points was that it combined those. It didn't have separate artwork and preview modes. Like you just worked in the preview mode. It also had color, I think, before Illustrator.
Are they still around?
Aldous Freehand? No. They're long gone, about 20 years. I think the last version came out in the early 2000s. Macromedia owned it at the time, I think. I guess this is actually the preview. I thought it was going to be shaded, but I guess it's like a technical illustration or something. Anyway, not a whole lot different. Yeah, things are slow. Anyway, and then the last thing I want to show you is a competitor to Fontographer, which is Letraset Font Studio. It came with this very nice little binder, very stylish looking. It was very short-lived, though. Here, let's see. So here's what it came. It came with 4 discs, including one disc here, which had some fonts on it. It actually had, Letraset developed their own font format, which was much higher resolution and more capable than PostScript. But it never went anywhere. It was designed, it was like worked better for like display fonts, and you could do like more stuff with it. But nobody ever made any letter fonts, except for Letraset. I'm not sure where you could use them. I think you had to have a special plugin or something like that to use them. They weren't just ordinary PostScript fonts.
What is non-FPU?
Okay, so non-FPU, FPU is a floating point unit. So if you had a Macintosh 2, that had a floating point unit in it, but this does not, because this is just a plain old 68,000 chip, not the faster 6820 chip. So I have to run that version. You had to know which version to run. It didn't automatically there was no way to sense it, I guess. So this is from 1990-91. And I think this is the last version that was ever released, sadly. What happened was Adobe acquired it and then basically buried it. I don't know why, because it was a really great program. Let's see, I'm going to open font. I actually did the initial release of Felt Tip Roman using this, and it was basically because it had a better bitmap font generator in it. It would automatically generate bitmap fonts. So like if I go look at the font, let's see, yeah. So here's like the bitmap font that it generated. Yeah.
So when did those stop being used?
They were not used on this. Once you had things like ATM, they weren't really used very much. So that was in the mid-90s. You still had to have at least one bitmap font size if you're selling a PostScript font, because that's where all of the metrics data was in the screen font folder or file. So the kerning, the font ID stuff, all that stuff was in the font suitcase, and then the printer font is where the outlines were. That's where the way it worked on the Mac anyway. I think on the PC it worked slightly differently. They also had something called a special, I forget what it's called, a AFM file, which is Adobe Font Metrics, which had all the kerning and spacing information. But on the Mac, that was in the font suitcase, so you had to have at least one bitmap font. But this program was kind of cool in that it basically broke the font down into like a database. So like here's the copyright, and here's the name of the font, and here's the I think, is this the here's like, it's basically like letting you see the contents of the whole font as if it were like you're drilling down into it. So here's the I think this is the outline. Double clicking on this, what do I get?
This is like a working font format for this
Yeah.
app,
Right.
and then you export or generate the
Yeah.
font files.
Right. So let me see here. Where is the... Okay, here's the outline. Okay, I think this is the outline. Yeah. So I double click on this. Yeah, there we go. And this was nice because the pen tool worked exactly like the one in Illustrator, which is one thing I liked about it. Seems kind of slow, but yeah, it's not quite as fast as Illustrator. It also has that sort of flashing thing that, yeah, that Fontographer suffered from. And I think you could, yeah, it doesn't look like you can see a preview of the character. Yeah, this is super slow. I don't think this is meant to run on a Mac Plus. But I know that at least one type designer, Lucas de Groot, was running this on an emulator 10 years ago, still building his fonts with it because he liked it so much. It was also a bit buggy, I recall, which is kind of sad because they never really updated it. But that was Font Studio, the lamented Font Studio. I think that's about it. Oh, let's see, I got a couple other things I wanted to mention. So eventually I got a larger screen for my Mac Plus. I had a Mac Plus like this back in the late 80s. Which replaced my original 128K Mac, was upgraded for $1,000 to a 512K Mac, and then upgraded again for $1,000 to a Mac Plus. So it was like the world's most expensive Mac Plus. And at some point, they dropped the price on the Mac Plus to like the $1,800, and that's when I bought one and replaced my original Mac with that.
When I bought my Mac Plus, it had 512.
It had 1 megabyte.
Look at that.
Yeah, the Mac Plus came with 1 megabyte. You could upgrade it to 4. This one's got 4, which I was able to get on eBay for about $20.
Don't forget CompuServe.
Right. And then you also notice I've got a external hard drive here hooked up to it. And then this is what the screen on that thing looked like. Now, this is sort of a problem. I don't know if you notice how curved it is. It was great having, it was like I just really wanted a larger screen. I mean, this screen is only 9 inches. I mean, it's smaller than an iPad, you know. And it was just hard to work on fonts on a screen this size. And so I got this, it was called the Big Picture. And it was an external display that you could, you know, install something inside the Mac, and it was kind of a Frankenstein kind of thing because this wasn't really meant for internal upgrades at all. But it worked, and it was, you know, you saw how slow it runs on this tiny screen here. It was felt even slower on a big screen like that. But that curved display killed me. I mean, that's something I wasn't really picturing. And not only was it curved, so you weren't really getting, like, you're getting this distorted image, but the geometry wasn't even all the way across. So it was actually, like, it actually was a little bit narrower on the right side than the left side. So if you drew a circle, it was kind of lopsided looking. And so I don't think I was ever totally happy as a type designer until I got a flat screen display in 2000 or so.
And all your H's have uneven stems.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was subtle, but you could see, once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. But I did my first fonts on screens like that. Here it is. I got a Mac 2 in about 1988 or so.
A 2 or a 2C?
No, it's a 2.
Okay.
Again, Apple's Macintoshes are so expensive. The only reason I was able to afford this is because I started dating a student from the U who used her account. Like, I basically bought it under her account. I bought this color monitor and the Mac 2 using her student account, and then gave her my Mac Plus. And there's my first scanner, Hewlett-Packard, and my first PostScript printer. Now, this PostScript printer was only half the price of the original LaserWriter, but it was still $4,000. And I think I probably had to take out a loan to get it. But it had more memory, and it was faster than the LaserWriter, and it could print almost edge to edge, I think. Anyway, that's it.
It's a lot of good visual of the Mac mouse next to your
Yeah,
Bluetooth.
there's
mouse.
little contrast there.